"If you don't want to go to the nursing home, get a job," my son said. I stood up smiling and packed my suitcase. An hour later, a luxury car honked at the gate. It was my new husband, and the look on Daniel's face when he saw Richard step out was worth every humiliating moment I'd endured in the past 6 months. Let me back up. I'm Margaret Sullivan, 62 years old, and until this morning, I thought I'd raised a decent human being. My husband died 18 months ago. Heart attack at 59. One minute he was mowing the lawn, the next he was gone. Daniel moved his new wife Jessica into our house 3 months after the funeral. "Just temporarily," he said, "while we look for our own place." I believed him because I'm an idiot who still saw her son as a 10-year-old boy who needed his mother. Jessica was 28, blonde, ambitious, and had the morals of a hungry shark. Within weeks, she was rearranging my furniture, throwing out my belongings, and treating me like hired help. Daniel said nothing. He'd look at his phone whenever she started in on me, pretending he couldn't hear her little comments about how the house needed updating and how old-fashioned decorating was so depressing. The apartment was mine, my name on the deed, bought with my inheritance from my parents. But Daniel had convinced me to add his name for estate planning purposes 6 months before his father died. I signed the papers because he was my son and I trusted him. Biggest mistake of my life. Margaret, Daniel, and I have been talking. You're 62 now, and frankly, you don't contribute anything to this household. You don't work, you don't clean properly, and honestly, you're just taking up space. We've looked into some very nice assisted living facilities. I stared at her. Assisted living? I'm 62, not 92. I don't need assistance. Well, you clearly need something because you can't even manage to keep a clean house anymore. Maybe it's early dementia. That runs in families, doesn't it? Daniel walked in then, and I looked at my son, waiting for him to tell his wife she was out of line. Instead, he shrugged. "Mum, Jessica has a point. You're getting older. Maybe it would be better if you had people around to help you. We found a great place, only $1,200 a month." $1,200 a month? On what income? I don't have that kind of money. Well, that's the thing. Daniel wouldn't meet my eyes. If you're not going to contribute to the household, you need to figure something out. Get a job. Do something. Otherwise, yeah, maybe the nursing home is the best option. The nursing home. For me, in my own apartment. That's when something inside me snapped. Not in a screaming, crying way. In a cold, clear way that made everything suddenly make sense. They wanted me gone. They wanted my apartment. They were going to take everything I had and throw me away like garbage. I stood up. "You're absolutely right, Daniel. I should do something." I walked to my bedroom and started packing. They thought I was broken. They thought I had nowhere to go. They didn't know about Richard. Richard Webb was a man I'd met at a grief support group 8 months ago. He'd lost his wife to cancer, was 70 years old, still sharp as a knife, and had made his fortune in commercial real estate. We'd become friends first, then more than friends. I hadn't told Daniel because it was none of his business, and because some part of me knew my son wouldn't approve of me being happy. 2 weeks ago, Richard asked me to marry him. I said yes. We'd planned to wait, to do things properly, but watching Daniel's smug face this morning, I made a phone call. "Richard, change of plans. Can you pick me up in an hour?" "Of course. What's wrong?" "I'll tell you when you get here. Bring the Mercedes." Now Richard was standing at my gate, 6'2", silver-haired, wearing a suit that cost more than Daniel's car, and looking at my son like he was something stuck to his shoe. "Margaret, darling, are you ready?" Richard's voice carried across the yard. Daniel's face went white. "Who the hell is that?" "That's my husband. Well, fiancé. We're getting married tomorrow. Richard, this is my son Daniel and his wife Jessica. I was just leaving." Jessica's mouth was hanging open. She looked at Richard's car, at his suit, at the Rolex on his wrist, and I could see her brain trying to recalculate everything. Wait, Mom, hold on. Husband? You're getting married? Why didn't you tell me? Why would I? You were too busy planning to ship me off to a nursing home. I picked up my suitcase and walked toward the gate. Daniel grabbed my arm. Mom, come on. Don't be like this. We were just worried about you. I looked down at his hand on my arm, then up at his face. Let go of me, Daniel. We should talk about this. You can't just leave. Watch me. Richard was at my side now, and his presence made Daniel step back. Richard didn't say anything threatening. He didn't have to. He just existed, and Daniel suddenly remembered he was a 34-year-old man who'd spent the last 6 months bullying his mother. Margaret, if you want to leave, that's your choice, Jessica said, recovering. But we'll need the apartment keys, since you're moving in with your new husband. The audacity of this woman. I almost laughed. The keys? To my apartment? Well, it's Daniel's apartment too. His name is on the deed, and since you're leaving, it makes sense that we'd take over the property. We'll discuss that with lawyers, Richard said quietly. Margaret owns that apartment. Her name was on the deed first. We'll be reviewing all the paperwork. Jessica's eyes narrowed. It doesn't matter what some lawyer says. Daniel has as much right to that apartment as she does. We'll see, I said. I'll be in touch. I got into Richard's car and didn't look back as we drove away, but in the side mirror I watched Daniel's face. He was angry now, not worried. He was already on his phone, probably calling a lawyer. Good. Let him try. Because Daniel didn't know what I knew. He didn't know I'd spent the last 3 weeks since Richard proposed doing my homework. He didn't know I'd met with 3 different lawyers and 1 very creative private investigator. He didn't know I'd been gathering evidence, documentation, and witnesses. He didn't know his mother wasn't the helpless old woman he thought she was. Are you okay? Richard asked as we pulled onto the highway. I'm perfect, I said. I should have done this months ago. The wedding is set for tomorrow at 2. Small ceremony, just us and 2 witnesses. Unless you want to wait. No, tomorrow is perfect. I looked at him. Thank you for understanding. Margaret, I've known you were planning something for weeks. You've had that look in your eyes. The same look I had when I was putting together the Riverside Plaza deal. It's the look of someone who knows exactly what they're doing and is 3 moves ahead of everyone else. I smiled. You know me too well. So what's the plan? Daniel and Jessica are getting married in 2 weeks. Big wedding, 200 guests, all their friends and her family. Jessica's been planning it for months, posting every detail on social media. It's going to be the social event of her life. And I'm going to make sure it's memorable for all the wrong reasons. Richard laughed. It was a warm, genuine sound. I married a dangerous woman. Not yet, you haven't, but tomorrow you will. We drove to Richard's house, a beautiful 3-story home in the suburbs with a view of the lake. It was about as far from my cramped apartment as you could get. Richard's lawyer was already waiting for us. Mrs. Sullivan, good to see you. I've prepared the documents you requested. It's all very straightforward. The documents were anything but straightforward. They were a detailed accounting of every asset my late husband and I had accumulated, every dollar I'd put into the apartment, and most importantly, every text message, email, and recording I'd made over the past 6 months, documenting Jessica's abuse and Daniel's complicity. This is excellent work, I said. How quickly can we file? I can have this submitted by end of business today. The judge has already reviewed the preliminary motion and indicated he's sympathetic to your position. Your son adding his name to your deed under pressure during a period of grief could be considered undue influence. Could be. Will be. The evidence is overwhelming. Text messages from your son saying he convinced you to add his name. Emails discussing how they plan to encourage you to move out. This is textbook financial elder abuse. Elder abuse. Hearing it said out loud made it real. My son was abusing me. How long until we get a ruling? 2 weeks, maybe 3, but I can get a temporary restraining order, preventing them from selling or refinancing the property by Monday. Do it. Richard squeezed my hand. This is really happening. This is just the beginning, I said. Before we continue, hit the hype button, subscribe, and like the video to help the channel grow. Tell us which city you are from in the comments. We'd love to get to know our audience better. The next day, Richard and I got married at the courthouse. There was no grand fanfare, no lavish ceremony, no expensive gowns or flower arrangements. Just the two of us, a couple of witnesses from Richard's office, a judge who smiled kindly at us, and a quiet sense of satisfaction that filled the small room. In the span of 15 minutes, I went from Margaret Lewis to Margaret Webb. The transformation was more than legal. It felt like a reclamation of my life, a symbolic severing of ties to a past that had grown toxic and oppressive. The judge offered a few warm words, his voice carrying an authority that was surprisingly gentle. Richard squeezed my hand under the table, and I felt a thrill, a mixture of joy and vindication, coursing through me. We left the courthouse hand in hand, stepping into a crisp, sunlit morning that felt like a promise of everything new and untainted. We decided to go out for lunch at an upscale restaurant downtown, one of those places where the waitstaff moves with quiet precision and the clinking of glasses forms a soft, constant background music. Richard ordered champagne, and I could see the amusement dancing in his eyes as he handed me a glass. To new beginnings, he said, lifting his flute. To revenge, I replied, echoing the thought that had been simmering in my mind for months. He laughed, a deep, genuine sound, and clinked his glass against mine. You're serious about this, aren't you? My son called me a burden and tried to steal my home. What do you think? I answered evenly, though the words carried the weight of years of frustration and betrayal. I think he has no idea who he's dealing with, Richard said, his tone calm but charged with quiet confidence. We lingered over our meal, savoring not just the food but the atmosphere, the subtle triumph that hung between us. It felt surreal, this quiet victory, this reclaiming of autonomy that I had been denied for far too long. Then my phone buzzed against the table, sharp and insistent. Daniel. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. Then Jessica called. Then Daniel again. Finally, the persistence became impossible to ignore, and I answered. What do you want, Daniel? My voice was sharp, guarded. Mum, where are you? We need to talk. I'm at lunch with my husband. What do you need? There was a long, awkward pause on the line, and then he spoke again, almost hesitantly. Husband? You really got married? Yesterday. It was lovely. Sorry you weren't invited, I said, letting a small edge creep into my tone. Mum, come on. Can we please just talk about this? Jessica and I feel terrible about yesterday. We were just worried about you. Lies. All lies. I felt the familiar surge of anger, the hard edge of betrayal sharpened by their audacity. What do you want, Daniel? We want to apologize and talk about the apartment situation. Jessica was out of line asking for the keys like that. Of course you still have every right to your own home. How generous of you, I replied, my voice dripping with sarcasm, though beneath it was the quiet satisfaction of knowing I finally held the power. Can you come by tonight? We can order dinner, talk things through. I don't think so, I said firmly. Mum, please, don't be like this. Like what? Like someone who doesn't appreciate being told to get a job or go to a nursing home? I asked, my words biting, my frustration spilling over. I'm sorry, I really am. It came out wrong. Just please, can we talk? I exhaled slowly, weighing the options. Fine. I'll come by tomorrow evening, 6 o'clock. Thank you. Really, thank you. I hung up and looked at Richard. They're panicking, I said, a small smile curling my lips. Good. Let them panic, he said, a quiet approval in his tone. That night, an email from my lawyer landed in my inbox. My heart thumped as I read the words. The restraining order had been filed. Daniel and Jessica would be served papers on Monday morning, giving them 48 hours to vacate my apartment or face legal consequences. The finality of it, the sense of control, was intoxicating. "You're really doing this," Richard said, his eyes studying me with a mixture of admiration and amusement. "I really am," I replied, feeling a thrill of empowerment that I hadn't experienced in years. Sunday morning arrived quietly, almost innocuously, but my phone quickly shattered the peace. 47 notifications, dozens of texts from Daniel, Jessica, and even Daniel's cousin Emma, who had always seemed like a friend, all asking me to reconsider, to think about family, to forgive, to understand. Family. They wanted to talk about family now, when their sense of entitlement had been denied them. I turned off my phone and spent the day with Richard. We walked through the hushed halls of a museum, lingering over paintings, absorbing the brushstrokes, the colors, the stories they told of other lives and other struggles. Later, we had dinner at his favorite Italian restaurant, the warm, fragrant air filled with the scent of garlic and fresh herbs. And then we returned home to curl up on the sofa and watch old movies. Peace settled over me like a heavy, comforting blanket. I realized I hadn't felt this relaxed, this unburdened, in months. Monday morning, the storm hit. My phone had 47 missed calls waiting for me. The papers had been served. I took a deep breath, then dialed Daniel's number. "Mom, what the hell is this? We're being evicted. From our own home?" His voice was a mix of fury and disbelief, shaking with the incredulity of someone who thought they had the upper hand. "From my home, Daniel. My home. That you tried to steal," I said, each word deliberate, savoring the sense of authority that now rested entirely with me. "Steal? Mum, I'm your son. My name is on the deed," he shouted, desperation bleeding through the anger. "Your name was added under false pretenses. The judge agrees," I replied firmly, relishing the clarity and truth in my statement. "What judge? What are you talking about?" he asked, confusion mingling with frustration, but there was nothing I could tell him that would soften the blow. "You'll find out soon enough. You have 48 hours to remove your belongings and return the keys." "You can't do this." "Watch me," I said simply, hanging up. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the thrill of victory, from the satisfaction of finally standing up for myself in a way that was irrevocable and undeniable. Jessica called next, her voice sharp and venomous. "You're really going to do this? Right before our wedding?" "Your wedding is in 2 weeks, Jessica. Plenty of time to find a new place," I said evenly, letting my words land like stones. "You're jealous. That's what this is. Jealous that Daniel chose me over you," she spat, venom laced with self-righteousness. "Jessica, I don't care who Daniel chose. I care that you tried to steal my home," I said, the line cutting off as I ended the call. "It's not stealing when his name is on the deed," she protested before I hung up. "Tell that to the judge," I muttered under my breath, smiling at the thought. For the next 2 days, I watched the chaos I had unleashed unfold in real time. Daniel's messages shifted from rage to pleading to threats, each one more frantic than the last. Jessica's voicemails were a symphony of fury, her words cascading over each other in a relentless torrent. I ignored all of it, feeling the satisfaction deepen with each ignored call, each unread message, each unanswered plea. Wednesday morning, my lawyer called, her voice tinged with amusement. "They filed a counter-motion. They're claiming you're mentally incompetent and that Daniel was added to the deed as your guardian." "Can they win?" I asked, genuinely curious but unafraid. "Not a chance. We have too much evidence. But it will drag things out another week or 2, she replied. "Let it drag. The longer this goes, the better," I said, my mind already spinning with the possibilities. "Why? What are you planning?" "Their wedding is in 10 days. I want the judge's ruling to come down the day before." I said it calmly, but inside, I felt a sharp, gleeful thrill at the timing, at the perfect orchestration of poetic justice. My lawyer laughed, a warm, incredulous sound. "You're diabolical." I prefer thorough, I said simply, settling back into my chair with a sense of calm satisfaction. The pieces were in place. The plan was unfolding exactly as I had envisioned, and for the first time in years, I felt the scales tipping in my favor. Richard came up behind me and placed a hand on my shoulder, his touch grounding, reassuring. "You know, you might actually enjoy this more than you thought," he murmured. "I am," I admitted, a slow smile spreading across my face. "I finally feel like I'm the one in control." The week stretched on, filled with tension and anticipation. Each call I ignored, each message left unread, was a small victory, a reminder that I was no longer at the mercy of their whims. And with every passing day, the reality sank deeper into Daniel and Jessica, a bitter truth that they could neither negotiate nor escape. As I watched the days tick by, I allowed myself a quiet reflection. All these years I had been patient, accommodating, often to my own detriment. I had tolerated disrespect, endured manipulation, and allowed my home, my sanctuary, to be threatened. But no longer. Each action I took now was deliberate, each move calculated, not out of malice, but out of a necessity to reclaim my life, my dignity, my space. Richard and I continued to savor our newfound freedom together. We explored hidden corners of the city, tried new cuisines, lingered in bookstores for hours, and spent long evenings in the comfort of our home, wrapped in blankets and the warmth of companionship that had nothing to do with obligation or family duty. The world felt open, expansive, full of possibilities I had long denied myself. Meanwhile, the storm of phone calls and messages from Daniel and Jessica intensified, a testament to the power I now held. And I knew, with a clarity that was almost intoxicating, that nothing would feel as sweet as the day the judge would hand down the ruling, the day their plans unraveled completely, the day justice, quiet and deliberate, would finally be mine. Every glance at my phone, every ding of a new message, every unanswered call was a reminder of the control I had fought so hard to reclaim. And in that control, in that deliberate, calculated triumph, I found not just satisfaction, but liberation. The past could no longer define me. The manipulations, the betrayals, the sense of powerlessness, they were all behind me. Now only the present mattered, and in it I was untouchable, unstoppable, thoroughly and unapologetically Margaret Webb. And so, as the week marched on, as the legal battle stretched and the tension thickened, I reveled in a freedom that was as intoxicating as champagne, as enduring as the quiet joy of a long-awaited victory. I had taken back my life, my home, my dignity, and there was no turning back. Not now, not ever. The next week was a carefully orchestrated campaign. I'd hired that private investigator for a reason, and now it was time to use what he'd found. Jessica wasn't just a social climber, she was a liar. She'd told Daniel she was 28. She was actually 34. She'd told him she worked in marketing. She worked in telemarketing, cold calling people to sell them extended car warranties. She'd told him her parents were deceased. They were alive and living in Nevada, and according to the investigator, they'd cut her off 2 years ago after she stole money from them. But the best part, Jessica was still married to her first husband, not separated, not divorced, still legally married, which meant her marriage to Daniel wouldn't be legal. I sat in Richard's study with all the documents spread out in front of me. Photos, marriage certificates, police reports from Nevada about the theft from her parents, even her real driver's license showing her correct age. "When are you going to drop this bomb?" Richard asked. "At their wedding." "Margaret, that's brutal." "Good." The wedding was on Saturday. The judge's ruling on my apartment was scheduled for Friday. Everything was lining up perfectly. On Thursday night, Daniel showed up at Richard's house. I watched him from the window as he got out of his car and walked up to the door. He looked terrible. Unshaven, wrinkled clothes, dark circles under his eyes. Good. Richard answered the door. Can I help you? I need to talk to my mother. She doesn't want to talk to you. Please, just 5 minutes. I came to the door. What do you want, Daniel? Mum, please, you have to drop this lawsuit. Jessica and I are getting married in 2 days. We've already spent $30,000 on this wedding. If we have to move out of the apartment now, we can't afford it. Please. You should have thought about that before you tried to throw me in a nursing home. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I was an idiot. Jessica was pushing me, and I just went along with it. I know that's not an excuse, but I'm begging you. Please don't do this. Do you know what it felt like, Daniel? Sitting in that apartment, listening to your wife call me useless, hearing you tell me to get a job or go to a home? Do you have any idea how much that hurt? He was crying now. Actual tears. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Sorry isn't enough. What do you want? Tell me what you want and I'll do it. I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember what it feels like to lose everything, because that's what you tried to do to me. Mom, please. Goodbye, Daniel. I closed the door in his face. Friday morning, the judge ruled in my favor. The apartment was mine. Daniel's name was removed from the deed. He and Jessica had 7 days to vacate or face eviction. The ruling was delivered at 9 a.m. By 9:30, Jessica was calling me. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail that was mostly screaming and curse words. At noon, Daniel called. Mom, you won. Okay? You won. You get the apartment. Just please, can we postpone the eviction until after the wedding? 1 week. That's all I'm asking. No. Mom. You have 7 days, Daniel. Use them wisely. I hung up and turned off my phone. Saturday arrived. The day of the wedding. Richard drove me to the venue, a beautiful old mansion converted into an event space. We weren't invited, obviously, but I'd arranged for us to be there anyway. I'd called the venue earlier in the week and told them I was Daniel's mother and needed to drop off a special gift. They'd been happy to accommodate me. We pulled into the parking lot at 1:30. The ceremony was at 2. Guests were already arriving. Women in expensive dresses, men in suits. Jessica's dream wedding. Are you sure about this? Richard asked. Absolutely. We walked into the venue. I was wearing a simple navy dress, nothing flashy. The coordinator saw me and smiled. Mrs. Sullivan, we put the gift table in the reception hall, right this way. I followed her through the building. The ceremony space was decorated with white roses and fairy lights. Very elegant, very expensive. The reception hall was even more elaborate. 10 round tables, a head table for the wedding party, a DJ booth, a photo booth, and yes, a gift table. I placed my envelope on the table. It was a large manila envelope, sealed and labeled to Jessica and Daniel. Thank you so much for accommodating us, I said to the coordinator. Of course. It's so sweet that you wanted to make sure they got your gift. If only she knew. Richard and I left the venue and drove to a coffee shop across the street. We sat in the window with a clear view of the entrance. Now we wait, I said. At 2 o'clock, the ceremony started. We couldn't see it from the coffee shop, but I'd timed everything perfectly. At 3:15, the ceremony would end. At 3:30, cocktail hour would start in the reception hall. At some point during that hour, someone would notice the envelope on the gift table. Someone would open it, and then everything would explode. 3:45. My phone rang. Daniel, I answered. Hello? I take it you opened my gift. In the background, I could hear chaos, shouting, crying, the sound of things breaking. Jessica, calm down. This is a wedding. Your wedding. Try to enjoy it. Richard looked at me. What did you put in that envelope? Everything. Her real age, her real job, her marriage certificate to husband number 1. The police report from Nevada. And just for fun, screenshots of text messages she sent to her ex-boyfriend 3 weeks ago, telling him she was only marrying Daniel for his money and his mother's apartment. Jesus Christ, Margaret. He wanted a family reunion. I gave him one. We watched from across the street as guests started streaming out of the venue. Some looked shocked, some looked angry, many were on their phones. 2 women were crying. A man was yelling at someone. Then we saw Jessica. She burst through the front doors, still in her wedding dress, mascara running down her face. Daniel was right behind her, trying to grab her arm. She spun around and slapped him across the face hard enough that we could hear it from across the street. "Don't touch me! Don't you dare touch me!" "Jessica, please, we can fix this." "Fix this? Fix this? Your mother just ruined my life. She ruined everything. She's insane. We'll sue her. We'll what, Daniel? Huh? She has proof of everything. Everything. I'm still married to David. Do you understand that? This whole wedding is illegal. We're not even married." Daniel's face went white. "What? I never divorced him. I couldn't afford it and I didn't think it mattered. But now everyone knows. My parents know. Your family knows. Everyone knows." She was hysterical now. Guests were gathering around, watching. Someone was filming on their phone. Jessica saw the phone and lunged at the person holding it. "Delete that! Delete it now!" Security came out then and tried to calm everyone down. Jessica was screaming at them too. Daniel just stood there, frozen, his whole world collapsing around him. Richard took my hand. "We should go." "Not yet. I want to see how this ends." 10 minutes later, police cars pulled up. Someone must have called about the disturbance. Officers got out and approached Jessica, who was still screaming. They talked to her for a few minutes, then talked to Daniel, then talked to security. Then they put Jessica in the back of a police car. "Oh my God," Richard said. "They're arresting her." "Probably for fraud. Getting married when you're already married is illegal." We watched as they drove away with Jessica. Daniel stood in the parking lot, still in his tuxedo, surrounded by the wreckage of his wedding day. His cousin Emma was next to him, talking to him, but he wasn't responding. He was just staring at nothing. I felt a brief moment of something that might have been pity. Then I remembered him telling me to get a job or go to a nursing home. The pity vanished. "Okay," I said. "Now we can go." The story was all over social media by Sunday morning. Someone at the wedding had posted the whole thing online, and it had gone viral. Disaster wedding was trending. People were sharing the video of Jessica slapping Daniel, photos of the police leading her away, even screenshots from my envelope. I deleted all my social media accounts and blocked every number I didn't recognize. Daniel called 37 times on Sunday. I didn't answer any of them. On Monday, my lawyer called. "Mrs. Webb, I need to inform you that your son has filed a harassment claim against you." "For what?" "For the incident at his wedding. He's claiming you intentionally caused emotional distress and damaged his reputation." "Can he win?" "No. Everything you revealed was true and documented. Truth is an absolute defense. But it will be messy. Let it be messy. There's something else. Jessica has been charged with bigamy. She's out on bail, but if convicted, she could face up to 5 years. 5 years. For marrying my son while still married to someone else. What about Daniel? He's clear. He didn't know about her previous marriage, so he's not criminally liable. But civilly, the wedding vendors are already suing them for breach of contract. The venue wants their money. The caterer, the photographer, the DJ, everyone. How much are we talking? At least $50,000, maybe more. I thought about that. $50,000, the cost of trying to steal from your mother. Good, I said. On Tuesday, Daniel showed up at Richard's house again. This time Richard didn't let him in. "Sir, please, I just need to talk to my mother." "Your mother has nothing to say to you. Please, 5 minutes, that's all." I came to the door again. I was tired of this. "What?" "Mom, I'm begging you. Please drop the harassment claim. Please tell the vendors you'll cover the costs. I can't afford this. Jessica and I are drowning. We're going to lose everything." "You mean like you tried to make me lose everything?" I know. I know I was wrong. I'm sorry, but please, I'm your son. Are you? Because a son wouldn't do what you did. Mom. 7 days, Daniel. You have 7 days to get out of my apartment. If you're still there on day 8, the sheriff will remove you. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem. I closed the door. Through the window, I watched him walk back to his car. He sat in the driver's seat for a long time before he finally drove away. You're not going to help him at all? Richard asked. Would you? He thought about it. No, probably not. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. The calls kept coming. The voicemails got more and more desperate. Daniel crying, Daniel angry, Daniel bargaining, Daniel begging. I didn't respond to any of them. On Saturday, 1 week after the wedding disaster, I drove to my apartment. My apartment. Mine. Daniel's car was in the parking lot. I took a deep breath and walked to the door. I used my key. They'd changed the locks, but my lawyer had gotten me copies. And stepped inside. The place was trashed. Furniture knocked over, holes punched in walls, garbage everywhere. It looked like a tornado had gone through it. Daniel was sitting on the floor in the living room, surrounded by boxes. He looked up when I came in. Hey, Mom. Hello, Daniel. I'm packing. I'll be out by tonight. Good. He stood up slowly. He'd lost weight. His eyes were hollow. Jessica left me. I heard. She blamed me for everything. Said it was my fault for not standing up to you. Said I was weak. Maybe you are. He flinched like I'd hit him. Yeah, maybe I am. We stood there in silence for a moment. I really am sorry, Mum, for everything. I know you don't believe me, but I am. Sorry doesn't fix what you broke, Daniel. I know. He went back to packing. I walked through the apartment, assessing the damage. Every room had been destroyed. This wasn't the result of moving out. This was rage. This was revenge. Did you do this? I asked, gesturing at the walls. Some of it. Jessica did most of it. She went crazy after the wedding, started destroying everything. I'll be sending you the bill for repairs. I figured. I watched him pack for a few more minutes. Part of me wanted to feel sorry for him. Part of me wanted to tell him it would be okay. But the part of me that remembered sitting in this apartment, being called useless and burdensome, that part stayed quiet. Where are you going to go? I asked. Emma said I could stay with her for a while, until I figure things out. That's good of her. She says I deserved everything that happened. She's right. He looked at me then, really looked at me. You planned all of this, didn't you? From the beginning. The wedding, the envelope, everything. Yes. How long? Since the day you told me to go to a nursing home. He laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. I really underestimated you. Yes, you did. He finished packing and loaded the last box into his car. Before he left, he turned back to me. I hope you're happy, Mom. I hope this was worth it. It was. He got in his car and drove away. I stood in my destroyed apartment and felt nothing but relief. The repairs took 6 grueling weeks, every day a reminder of the chaos Daniel had left in his wake. The cost came to $42,000, an eye-watering sum, but one I never intended to recoup fully. Daniel couldn't pay. He hadn't been capable of handling his own responsibilities for years, and now the consequences of his carelessness and greed had landed squarely in his lap. I filed a judgment against him, knowing it would take years for him to pay it off, but the money itself was irrelevant. What mattered to me was the principle, the message that his actions had consequences, and that I would not be a victim to his entitlement. The satisfaction was in knowing that every dollar owed was a tangible reminder of the betrayal he had attempted and the audacity he had displayed when he thought he could take what was mine without repercussion. Richard proved to be an invaluable partner throughout the entire process. He approached the redesign of the apartment with the same careful consideration he applied to his business dealings, methodical and precise, but with a creative spark that I would never have admitted I craved. Together, We tore down a wall that had always made the apartment feel cramped, transforming the layout into a flowing space where the living room and kitchen merged seamlessly. We installed a new, state-of-the-art kitchen, the countertops gleaming, the cabinets designed for both function and aesthetic appeal. The old scratched hardwood flooring was replaced with polished oak that radiated warmth, and the lighting was updated throughout to create a soft, inviting glow. By the time we finished, the apartment was unrecognizable, a place that felt safe and strong, and, most importantly, mine. It looked nothing like the prison of anxiety and humiliation it had been under Daniel's presence. It looked like home. One sunny afternoon, Emma stopped by while the contractors were still bustling through the apartment, their drills and hammers punctuating the air. She brought coffee, and her eyes carried a weight of apology that seemed almost tangible. I hadn't expected her, and I wasn't sure I wanted her there, but I didn't turn her away. "I should have said something," she admitted, placing the cups carefully on the countertop. "When I saw how Jessica was treating you, I should have stood up for you." "You weren't the one who owed me that," I said calmly, taking a sip of the coffee she had brought, letting it warm me as I surveyed the ongoing work around me. "Daniel was." She flinched slightly at the sharpness in my voice, but pressed on. "He's miserable, you know, working 2 jobs to try to pay off the wedding vendors, living in my spare bedroom. Jessica won't talk to him. Her parents threatened to sue him for the embarrassment." I felt a quiet satisfaction rise in me, a small, unspoken vindication. "Good," I said simply, letting the word hang in the air, not needing to elaborate. Emma exhaled, a mixture of frustration and sympathy. "You're really not going to forgive him, are you?" I tilted my head, studying her, my expression thoughtful. "Would you, if someone tried to steal your home and put you in a nursing home?" She shook her head, her brown eyes meeting mine with honesty. "No, I probably wouldn't." "Then why should I?" I asked, my tone firm, leaving no room for debate. "Because he's your son," she replied quietly, the weight of expectation heavy in her voice. "That didn't stop him from trying to destroy me," I said evenly, the anger no longer raw but controlled, a cold certainty that settled deep in my chest. Emma nodded slowly, as if she understood but could not argue. She lingered for a moment, then left. I didn't blame her for trying. Family loyalty is a strange, stubborn force, one that can often be misplaced, and I recognized in her actions the remnants of her own internal struggle between loyalty and morality. 3 months passed since the wedding debacle, and life had started to regain a sense of rhythm. Then a letter arrived from Jessica. It was long, rambling, and dripping with attempts at justification and excuses. She was sorry, she wrote, but she couldn't help but insert blame at every turn. She was sorry, but it wasn't really her fault, because Daniel should have known she was still married. She was sorry, but I should have just given them the apartment because I was old and didn't need it. She was sorry, but she insisted I was a vindictive, heartless woman who had ruined her life. I read the letter once, the corners of my mouth lifting into a bitter smile. The audacity of it made me laugh quietly to myself, a sharp, satisfying laugh that echoed the quiet strength I had gained over these months. Then I crumpled the letter in my hand and tossed it into the recycling bin. Its words were inconsequential, meaningless. They held no power here, no more than the wind outside the window. Richard and I settled into married life in a way that was comfortable, joyful, and entirely our own. He was kind, often funny, brilliant with business strategy, and astutely perceptive of human nature. Most importantly, he understood my anger in a way that Daniel never had. He had been betrayed by his own family years ago, a brother who had tried to seize control of the company he had built, and he knew intimately what it felt like to fight back. There was a quiet camaraderie in our shared understanding of vengeance and justice, a bond that was both subtle and profound. One night, as we lay together in the peace of our shared home, he turned to me, his voice gentle but curious. Do you regret any of it? Not even a little bit, I replied, my voice calm, steady, unwavering. The truth of it felt like armor, like the steel of a sword that had been forged in fire and purpose. You destroyed your relationship with your son, he said, not accusingly, but as a statement of fact. He destroyed it first. I just finished the job, I answered simply, with the quiet satisfaction of one who had righted a wrong that had festered far too long. Fair enough, he said, with a small smile, pulling me close, a soft acknowledgement of the justice that had been served. 4 months after the wedding, a call came from my lawyer. Jessica's bigamy trial had been scheduled for the next month, and they wanted me to testify. I felt a momentary twinge of nervous anticipation, but it was quickly replaced by resolve. About what? I asked. About the evidence you gathered. The marriage certificate, the investigation, everything, my lawyer replied. Will testifying hurt Daniel? I asked, a small shadow crossing my face. No, he's not charged with anything. But it will ensure Jessica is convicted, my lawyer said firmly, reassuringly. Then I'll do it, I said without hesitation, my voice steady with purpose. The trial itself was brief but intense. Jessica's lawyer attempted every possible angle, arguing that she didn't know bigamy was illegal, that it was an honest mistake, that she was a victim of Daniel's family drama. Every argument was dismantled systematically, piece by piece, by the prosecutor, armed with the meticulous evidence I had gathered over months. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. Their verdict was swift, their decision unanimous, guilty, 3 years. Jessica received 3 years in prison for bigamy and fraud. Daniel was present in the courtroom that day. His eyes met mine once, across the distance of the room, and in that fleeting moment, I thought I saw a hint of understanding. Or perhaps it was just defeat, the hollow recognition of consequences long overdue. Either way, it didn't matter. I walked out before he could approach me, before any words could be exchanged. The sense of closure was quiet but powerful. I had fought, I had won, and I had reclaimed every inch of my life, my dignity, and my home. The apartment, the renovations, the legal battles, they were all symbols of a life I refused to let be dictated by those who sought to diminish me. Richard and I returned to our peaceful routines, building a life rooted in mutual respect, understanding, and shared joy. Even as the world continued around me, the echoes of past betrayals faded. I moved through each day with a calm certainty, my home a fortress of memory, intention, and reclamation. Each corner of the apartment, each gleaming surface, each space we had transformed together was a testament to the life I had chosen, a life in which I was no longer beholden to anyone else's whims. And through it all, I felt a sense of quiet, enduring satisfaction. The battles were over. The wrongs had been righted. I had emerged not just victorious, but liberated, and in that liberation, I found a strength I had not known I possessed. The past no longer held sway, and the future was a canvas painted in the colors of my choosing. For the first time in decades, I truly felt free. 2 years passed. The apartment was beautiful now, better than it had ever been. Richard and I split our time between his house and my place. Life was good. I heard through Emma that Daniel had finally paid off the wedding vendors. He was working as a manager at a tech company, making decent money, trying to rebuild his life. He'd tried to date a few times, but nothing stuck. Jessica was still in prison. I didn't think about him much. When I did, it was with a sort of distant curiosity, like wondering about a character in a book you finished reading years ago. Then Emma called. "Margaret, I need to tell you something. Daniel's in the hospital." My stomach dropped. What happened? Car accident. Someone ran a red light and T-boned him. He's okay, mostly. Broken leg, some bruised ribs. But he's asking for you. No. Margaret. No, I'm not doing this. He's your son. He stopped being my son when he tried to steal my home. He almost died. But he didn't. Emma was quiet for a long moment. You really have no forgiveness in you, do you? Not for this, no. She hung up. Richard found me sitting in the kitchen, staring at nothing. Daniel? He asked. How did you know? You have that look, the one you get when you're trying not to feel something. He's in the hospital. Car accident. Are you going to see him? Should I? Richard sat down next to me. That's not a question I can answer. He asked for me. Of course he did. You're his mother. I was his mother. Then he threw me away. And you threw him back. So you're even. It's not about being even. Then what's it about? I thought about that. What was it about? Revenge? I'd already gotten that. Justice? The courts had provided that. So what was left? I don't know, I said finally. Then maybe you should figure it out. I didn't go to the hospital that day, or the next day, or the day after that. But a week later, I found myself in the parking lot of County Medical, sitting in my car, trying to decide. This is stupid, I said out loud. He doesn't deserve this. But I got out of the car anyway. Daniel was in room 412. I stood outside for 5 minutes before I pushed the door open. He was awake, staring at the ceiling. His left leg was in a cast, elevated. His face was bruised. He looked over when I came in. Mom. Daniel? You came. Emma said you asked for me. I did. He shifted in the bed, wincing. Thank you. For what? For coming. I didn't think you would. I sat down in the chair by his bed. Neither did I. We sat in silence for a while. The machines beeped. Footsteps passed in the hallway outside. I've been thinking a lot, Daniel said finally, about everything, about how I treated you, about who I became. And I was a piece of shit. I let Jessica manipulate me. I let my greed blind me. I forgot who you were, what you'd done for me my whole life. I forgot what Dad would have thought. Your father would have been ashamed. I know. More silence. I'm not looking for forgiveness, Daniel said. I know I don't deserve it. I just wanted to tell you that I understand now. What you did, why you did it, I deserved all of it. Yes, you did. I thought about calling you so many times over the past 2 years, but I was too ashamed. And then this happened. He gestured at his cast. And I thought, what if I died? What if I died and the last thing I said to you was that I hoped you were happy? What kind of son does that? A son who made terrible choices. Yeah. I looked at him lying there, broken and sorry, and I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, but maybe understanding. Maybe acknowledgement that people can change, even if it takes them hitting rock bottom to do it. You're really sorry, I said. Not a question. I'm really sorry. And if I hadn't done what I did, if I'd just quietly left and let you have the apartment, I'd probably still be with Jessica, still be an entitled asshole, still be the worst version of myself. So I did you a favor. He laughed, then winced because laughing hurt. In the most painful way possible, yeah. You did. I stood up. I should go. Wait. He reached out, then stopped himself. Do you think... someday... maybe we could try again? Not now. I know it's too soon. But someday... I looked at him for a long moment. My son, the child I'd raised, who'd lost his way, who'd hurt me worse than anyone else ever had. Maybe, I said. Someday, if you prove you've really changed. How do I do that? Figure it out yourself. That's part of growing up. I left him there and walked back to my car. Richard was waiting in the passenger seat. How was it? He asked. Strange. Are you going to forgive him? I don't know. Maybe. Eventually. If he earns it. That's more than I expected. Me too. We drove home in comfortable silence. 6 months after the hospital visit, Daniel showed up at my apartment. The knock at the door was tentative, almost hesitant, and when I opened it, I barely recognized him. Time had changed him. He looked thinner, but in a way that suggested he had been shedding more than just pounds. He carried a steadiness in his posture, a clarity in his eyes that had been absent for years. His hands were steady when he held the folder he had brought, and there was a deliberate care in his movements, as if he had rehearsed this visit over and over in his mind. "I need to show you something," he said, his voice quiet but firm. There was no pleading in it, no attempt to manipulate, just a plain statement of fact. I studied him for a long moment, assessing. The years of hurt didn't vanish. The resentment I had carried for the betrayals and the audacity of the past didn't simply dissipate, but there was something undeniably different about him. Something real. I stepped aside and gestured for him to come in. He crossed the threshold carefully, carrying the folder like it was fragile, and settled into the armchair across from me. I closed the door behind him, and for a moment we just regarded each other, measuring, cautious, yet open to the possibility that things could be different. "What is this?" I asked, gesturing to the folder he set down on the coffee table between us. "Everything," he said. "Every dollar I owe you, calculated with interest. The $42,000 for repairs, the legal fees, everything, and a payment plan. I've already made the first 3 payments, to your lawyer, not to you directly, so you know it's legitimate." I picked up the folder and flipped through the meticulously organized papers. They were detailed, comprehensive, and astonishingly thorough. Every payment I had been forced to make, every cost, every expense, down to the penny, was accounted for. He had included a detailed payment history, future payment dates, even a letter from his bank confirming that automatic transfers had been set up. Every piece of the puzzle was documented and undeniable. "Why?" I asked, my voice calm but tinged with curiosity. "Because I owe you," he said simply. "Not just the money. I owe you an actual apology, backed up with action. Words don't mean anything without proof." "You could have just sent this to my lawyer," I said, raising an eyebrow. "I could have," he admitted. "But I wanted to face you. I wanted to look you in the eye and tell you that I'm doing everything I can to make this right." His voice carried a weight of sincerity that made it difficult to dismiss. I set the folder down on the table, letting the weight of it settle between us. "This doesn't fix what you did," I said, my voice measured. "I know," he replied quietly. "Nothing can fix it, but maybe it's a start." "And Jessica?" I asked, probing gently. "She gets out next year. I have no plans to see her or talk to her. Ever. That part of my life is over." There was a quiet finality in his words, a boundary set that felt protective rather than defensive. "And Emma says you're in therapy," I said, a note of skepticism in my tone. He blinked, a flicker of surprise crossing his features. "She told you that?" "When I let her," I replied. "She updates me occasionally." He exhaled, a sound both resigned and relieved. "Yeah, I'm in therapy. Been going for a year now. Turns out I had a lot to work through." "Like what?" I asked, leaning forward slightly, curiosity piqued despite myself. "Like being spoiled, like feeling entitled to things I didn't earn, like not understanding the value of what you and Dad built." He paused, his eyes fixed somewhere just beyond mine, as if tracing the path of his own mistakes. "Like being a coward who let his wife abuse his mother." The honesty caught me off guard. I had not expected such reflection, such candid acknowledgement of failure. "That's quite a list," I said, letting the words hang between us, more as an observation than judgment. "It's a start," he said simply, and the weight of those words was not lost on me. We sat in silence for a moment, the kind of silence that isn't empty, but full of unsaid apologies, of tentative hope, of the fragile possibility that things could begin to shift. Then he began to talk, quietly, steadily, about his life since the divorce, about the work he had put into himself, about the changes he was making in his day-to-day existence. He spoke of his job with a kind of pride I hadn't heard before, of learning to manage his responsibilities, of slowly earning the respect he had once taken for granted. He told me about the payment plan, about how he had recalculated his finances, cut out unnecessary spending, and taken on extra work to ensure he could meet his obligations. He described the counseling sessions, the books he had read, the moments of self-reflection that had been uncomfortable but necessary. Every story he told was a testament to the fact that he was no longer the person who had once assumed he could take whatever he wanted without consequence. He didn't ask me for forgiveness. He didn't beg. He didn't attempt to force a reconciliation. He simply presented himself, plainly, honestly, as someone striving to be better. When he finally left, the apartment felt quieter, more open, and I realized that something inside me had shifted. It wasn't forgiveness, at least not yet, but it was a crack in the wall I had built around my heart. Possibility had seeped in where there had only been resentment for so long. Later that evening, Richard found me on the balcony, the city lights twinkling below us. "That was your son's car I saw earlier," he said, a note of curiosity in his voice. "It was," I admitted. And he's trying, really trying." The words were soft, uncertain, but they carried the weight of my recognition that change, genuine change, was occurring. "Is that enough?" he asked, a question that hung in the air like a challenge. "I don't know yet," I admitted, staring at the horizon, as if the distance could provide clarity. 3 months later, Emma invited Richard and me to dinner. When we arrived, I froze briefly when I saw Daniel already seated at the table. His presence was not unexpected exactly, but the way my body reacted reminded me that the past could not be erased so easily. "Ambush?" I asked, trying to mask my apprehension with a wry tone. "Family dinner," Emma corrected gently, her hand resting lightly on my arm. "Is that okay?" I looked at Richard and he shrugged, leaving the choice to me. I drew a slow breath, steadied myself, and said, "It's okay." The dinner began with an awkwardness that was palpable. Daniel was careful, almost painfully so, maintaining a respectful distance, speaking only when prompted, careful not to overshare, careful not to overstep. But as the evening progressed, the tension began to ease. Conversations flowed more naturally. Daniel asked about Richard's business, genuinely curious about the challenges and achievements. Richard asked about Daniel's job, his tone easy but interested. Emma told stories of family history, anecdotes that drew laughter from all of us, the warmth of shared memory bridging some of the gap between past grievances and present civility. At one point, Daniel looked at me directly and smiled. A real smile, not forced, not apologetic, but honest and light. It was a small thing, yet profoundly disarming. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly, his voice low but steady. "Thank you for not making it weird," I replied, the corners of my mouth lifting in genuine acknowledgement. "The night's not over yet," he said, a hint of playful challenge in his tone. I laughed, the sound light and surprising in its ease. For a brief, fleeting moment, the past seemed less heavy, the present brighter, and the future, not completely unmarked by caution, not yet unscarred, felt at least a little possible. The laughter lingered between us, a bridge between yesterday's pain and the potential of tomorrow's reconciliation. As the evening wore on, I realized that what Daniel had brought to the table that day was not just the folder of payments or the meticulous documentation of debts repaid. It was himself, fully, imperfectly, sincerely, and for the first time in years, he seemed willing to meet me as an equal, not as a child demanding entitlement, not as a man running from accountability, but as someone committed to making amends in the only ways that truly mattered, through honesty, action, and the slow, careful rebuilding of trust. And in that fragile, delicate space, I allowed myself a small but significant hope. Not yet forgiveness, not yet restoration, but the opening of a door I had thought forever closed, the the faintest glimmer of possibility that perhaps, in time, the rift might narrow, the wounds might heal, and the family we had been capable of being could exist once again, cautiously, carefully, and entirely on new terms. Another year passed. Daniel kept making his payments, never missed a single one. He got promoted at work, started dating someone nice, a teacher named Sarah, who didn't take any of his shit. He seemed, for the first time in years, like the son I'd raised. We had dinner once a month. Sometimes at Emma's, sometimes at restaurants, once at Richard's house, never at my apartment. That was still off limits, and Daniel respected that boundary. Then came the call. "Mum," Daniel's voice was shaky. "Can you meet me at the apartment? Your apartment, please." "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I just need to see you there. Please." I drove over with a knot in my stomach. What if he'd done something to the place? What if this whole redemption arc had been a lie? But when I got there, the apartment was fine. Better than fine. The front door had been repaired, professionally, the damaged wood replaced completely. Daniel was standing inside, next to a new piece of furniture, a beautiful wooden bookshelf, handmade by the look of it. "What is this?" I asked. "I made it, in a woodworking class I've been taking. It took me 6 months. I wanted to make something for you, for the apartment, something to replace one of the things Jessica destroyed." I walked over and ran my hand along the wood. It was smooth, perfectly finished, with careful dovetail joints and a warm honey stain. "It's beautiful. I wanted to give you something that would last, something you could keep and remember that I'm not that person anymore, that I'm trying to be someone you can be proud of." I turned to face him. "Why does this matter so much to you?" "Because you're my mother, because I love you." "Daniel, I'm not asking you to forget what happened. I'm not even asking you to completely forgive me. I'm just asking you to let me keep trying, to let me keep being part of your life, even just a small part." I looked at my son, really looked at him, saw the man he'd become through loss and consequences and hard work, saw someone who'd hit rock bottom and clawed his way back up. "Okay," I said, "okay. Okay, you can keep trying." He smiled, and there were tears in his eyes. "Thank you." We stood there in the apartment, in the space that had been a battleground and was now just a home again. The bookshelf stood between us, solid and real, proof of change. "There's something else," Daniel said. "I've paid off everything I owe you, the full amount plus interest. You should receive confirmation from your lawyer this week." "Daniel, you didn't have to." "Yes, I did. I owed you. Now it's paid. We're square." "We're not square. Money doesn't square this." "I know, but it's a start." He left shortly after, and I called Richard to tell him what happened. "So you're really going to let him back in?" Richard asked. "I think so. Slowly. But yes. Good. Everyone deserves a second chance." "Did your brother ever get a second chance? The one who tried to steal your company?" "No, but that's because he never asked for one. Never tried to make it right. If he had—" Richard paused. "I'd like to think I would have been as gracious as you're being." "I'm not being gracious. I'm being practical. He's my son. He's the only family I have left besides Emma, and he's actually trying." "Then that's all that matters." Jessica was released from prison on a Tuesday in May. I know because Daniel called to tell me. "She tried to contact me," he said. "I blocked her number." "Good. She's apparently living with her parents in Nevada. They're not happy about it." "I imagine not." "She sent me a letter before she left, blaming me for everything, saying it was my fault she went to prison." "Typical." I threw it away. I don't need that poison in my life anymore. 3 weeks later, Jessica showed up at my apartment. I was home alone when the buzzer rang. I checked the camera Richard had installed and saw her standing there, looking older and harder than I remembered. I didn't buzz her in. She buzzed again, and again. Finally, she started yelling into the intercom. I know you're home. I saw your car. We need to talk. I picked up the intercom. No, we don't. You ruined my life. You ruined your own life. I just exposed it. Let me in. No. I'll stand here all day. Then you'll be arrested for trespassing. I hung up and called building security. They escorted her out. She went quietly, surprisingly, but not before screaming one last thing at the camera. She never came back. I heard later that she tried to contact Daniel at his work and was escorted off the property. She tried to contact Emma and was blocked. She tried to create new social media accounts to harass me and got banned. Eventually, she gave up and disappeared back to Nevada. Good riddance. 5 years after the nursing home comment. 5 years after Jessica's ruined wedding. 5 years after I stopped being a doormat and started being a force. Richard and I were sitting on the balcony of my apartment, watching the sunset. Daniel was inside, helping Sarah set the table for dinner. Emma and her husband were in the kitchen, arguing good-naturedly about how much garlic to put in the pasta sauce. You did it, Richard said quietly. Did what? Won. You won everything. I thought about that. I'd kept my home. I'd exposed Jessica's lies. I'd taught Daniel the hardest lesson of his life. I'd built a new family with Richard. I'd set boundaries and defended them. Yeah, I said. I guess I did. Any regrets? Not one. Daniel came out onto the balcony. Dinner's ready. Sarah made her famous lasagna. I'll be right there. He started to go back inside, then stopped. Mum, thank you for everything. For not giving up on me, even when I gave up on myself. You earned your way back, Daniel. That's all you. Still, thank you. He went inside, and I could hear Sarah laughing at something Emma said. That's a good sound, Richard said. What is? Family. Actual family, not the toxic kind. Yeah, it is. We went inside and sat down to dinner. The table was crowded, loud, full of laughter and good food and people who'd earned their place there. At one point, Daniel raised his glass. A toast. To Mom, for being the strongest, scariest, most badass woman I know, and for teaching me that actions have consequences. Hear, hear, Emma said. Everyone clinked glasses. I looked around the table at these people, my chosen family built from the ashes of betrayal. Richard squeezed my hand under the table. Worth it? He whispered. I smiled. Every second. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, I stood in my apartment. My home, my space, mine. The bookshelf Daniel made was full of books now. Photos of better times lined the walls. Every trace of Jessica and the nightmare she'd brought was gone, replaced by something real and earned. I thought about the woman I'd been 5 years ago, scared, hurt, being pushed around by her own son. I barely recognized her now. If you don't want to go to the nursing home, get a job, Daniel had said. So I'd gotten a job. The job of defending myself, of demanding respect, of showing everyone who'd underestimated me exactly who I was. And I'd done that job perfectly. I turned off the lights and went to bed, Richard already asleep beside me. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new adventures, new chances to prove myself. But tonight I could rest, knowing I'd won the war I never asked to fight, and I'd won it on my terms.